Chapter 71. Stabilizer. Broly slowly woke up. He looked down on the two beauties that were sleeping on his chest. They even had their legs curled around his, which made him feel blissful. He saw his tablet blinking. He carefully wriggled his way out and picked it up. It was about the devices that would stabilize the space inside the rift. The previous crew was to be gathered and go for a test run with it. He turned around and wanted to wake the two girls up, as they were part of the crew. He saw that now he was out of bed. They had snuggled up and embraced each other. "Hey, you two monkeys, get up." He went up to them and squeezed their tails, slightly pulling them. They started moaning. Broly looked at the tails in his hand and started thinking about something he hadn't considered yet. A grin appeared on his face. "Morning, Broly," Kana said while rubbing her eyes. "Why are you suddenly so small, and what is this elastic dash?" "Hiya, Kana, stop it." Aaliyah screamed as she escaped Kana's gropes while pulling the sheets to cover herself. She started pointing at the dumbfounded Kana. "What are you doing here? Where is Broly?" "Cough. Here," Broly said awkwardly. "Sorry, but there is no way in hell I would sleep in the closet. Why are you looking at me like that?" Kana said as Aaliyah stared angrily and mostly embarrassed at her. Kana shrugged and started licking the air, before saying, "You can take a punch to the face without flinching but are squirming when I lick you for a bit. Aaliyah, you have outdone yourself, and you only started having interest in sex since only a bit more than a week," Kana said teasingly. Aaliyah couldn't take it anymore and covered herself with the sheets. "You know, I thought that after you declared that you would fuck Broly, you wouldn't take several days. You know how frustrating it got? Just stop, I get it." Aaliyah shouted and quickly ran to the bathroom while picking her battle armor up. "Why are you even embarrassed in the first place? We will eventually spend our time together," Kana shouted after her. Broly shook his head. "Stop teasing her and get up and start dressing. The stabilizers are ready. You are always so nice to her, but you only order me around." Kana pouted as she stared at him. "Yeah, I have to be clear, otherwise you wouldn't listen." "That's not true. I am very obedient." She shook her fist. "Yeah, and what was that when we fought the CEs? I remember clear dash. Stop it, I get it." Like Aaliyah, she ran into the bathroom with her clothes. "Hey, what are you doing here?" "I am getting dressed, obviously." "That's not what I mean. Can't you wait?" "Okay, then I will get dressed outside with Broly. On the other hand, stay here. Click, it is time for revenge." She locked the door and only screams and moans resounded through the door as she, viciously, attacked Kana. Broly looked down at himself and quietly dressed himself while listening to the birds chirping. They quickly arrived at the meeting, and like the first time, they were given some details and were prepared for the takeoff. Broly stood inside the cockpit with Violet, who was operating the spaceship, and waited for the go sign. After a while, they took off with the 200-strong crew, and shortly after were slowly entering the rift. Without hitch, they went inside and were able to release the stabilizers. Hundreds of drone-like devices were released and built a hexagon after hexagon deep into the rift. Broly and the others were already on the lookout for any disturbances. They were currently blasting their ki to lessen the burden on the drones. The drones connected to each other, forming a hexagon-shaped tube extending into the rift. It looked like the tube tore through the nebula as only normal space with stars shone back at them inside the tube. The whole crew were on the verge of jubilation, but this was just the start. After successfully building the pathway, they needed to test the waters. They sent a small space pod capable of an all-surround video transfer to look at the situation ahead. The pod slowly flew along the tube, filming everything on its way. The crew was silent as they waited anxiously about the result. The pod flew further, and slowly they saw how the pod was beginning to distort before disappearing altogether. The connection was terminated, but they all released a sigh of relief. They looked over the sent footage and data to analyze if it was safe. After determining that there were no problems, they began the final test to see if they could get out. Broly started flying into space along the tube where the pod flew at. As he traveled, he powered up directly into his legendary state, and his eyes turned yellow. He was currently in his strongest form. Although he directed all his energy and focus to the front, the crew behind him couldn't even breathe as they looked at the person who released a tremendous amount of ki. Kana and Aaliyah powered up into Super Saiyan 2 and shielded the crew from the residue ki, but their main focus was still on Broly. If they saw something out of the norm, they would be the ones to pull him back or rather assist him. After all, after Broly, they were the strongest people on this planet. Broly faintly felt the connection to his ki. He sent ahead being lost, but he knew that had to be because it entered another space out of his reach. He only had to traverse it and bring back the pod. They saw Broly's body distorting and finally vanish. This was all expected. Now he only needed to return, and the mission would be a full success. Broly's vision abruptly changed, not different to when he entered or exited on the other side. He knew that he had arrived in the normal universe. He looked at his vital data on his suit and saw that everything was normal. He looked around and saw the pod flying further into space. Before he flew to it, He released a small little ball that would mark his way back. He then quickly arrived at the pod and stopped it. He went inside and turned it on manual. As soon as he turned his pod around, he was astonished by the scene. A gigantic red planet broken into thousands of pieces suspended in space, and a distant dim star far away in the background. That is how the universe sees us? A destroyed planet void of life? Broly smiled bitterly, but it was to be expected. That was probably the reason why no other Saiyans were mentioned in the series. This, or because they all died in the rifts without that Saiyan's guidance. He looked at the ball and steered towards it. Without picking it up, he flew past it. His pod distorted, and he was back in the nebula rift. He saw Aaliyah's and Kana's anxious faces as they waited for his return. He felt warm inside as he carefully flew towards them. The other crew members were already cheering at his return and the successful mission. He exited the pod and was immediately greeted with two Super Saiyans crashing into him, hugging him tightly. They had bright smiles on their faces. He patted their backs for a bit. They then stored away the pod and flew out of the rift to deliver the good news. On the ground, as soon as they stepped outside, they were screaming and cheering, immediately letting everyone know of the success. They all hugged each other and celebrated. But Broly knew this wasn't the end for him. He still needed to clear things up with the other leaders. He saw the city lord nod at him and then disappear with the other leaders. He made Aaliyah and Kana know that he would leave shortly and they should celebrate without him. They were confused but knew that it had to be something important, considering the serious tone of his voice. He quickly went towards the secret meeting of the leaders and started discussing. After Broly described what he saw and analyzed the data of the pod, they were arguing about what they were going to do now that they could return to the normal universe. Some wanted to leave for their home area and look if there were some survivors on a nearby planets. Others wanted to build a joint headquarters on a new planet. But in one point they were all on the same page. They wanted to leave. Not just most but all. After careful thoughts and after all these years of searching a traversable rift, it showed them that even though it could be a good defense mechanism, it would inevitably be a cage. Who would guarantee that enemies wouldn't throw a bomb inside the rift, completely throwing the rift into disarray and cutting them off once again from the universe? Now it was time for them to decide their future actions. Chapter 72, Plans. It was never addressed in the series, but with power that exceeded natural growth, the cells are strengthened and to a degree extended one's lifespan. Additional, with his life force, he would have a guaranteed long life. He had status, women, power, and a long life. Everything he could only dream of in his past life. To be honest, there wasn't any reason why he should leave this planet. With the distortion of space and time around the planet, it would be almost impossible to find them. Indeed, he could live the secure life he always wanted. But was that what Broly wanted now?
No.
As a child, seeing the characters in his favorite show made him want to be as strong as they were. With the gods coming into play later, even as an adult he dreamed about becoming as strong as Kakarot and the others. But now he became Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan. A Saiyan that by mere existing could rival the future strongest people in this and the other universes. He didn't just want power, he now craved more. To see the peak and to surpass it. He wanted his name to resound through the ages. An ever-living legend. As if he could hide himself on this closed-off planet, so he could live comfortably. That wasn't his goal anymore. He wanted to be the most powerful living being. To do so, it wasn't enough to be strong, he needed to experience the universes, challenge experts with all kinds of abilities, and defeat them all. Kakarot, Vegeta, Hit, Jiren, the gods of destruction, the angels, and even Zeno. He will defeat every single last of them and surpass them all. Of course, it would be difficult to gain the attention of these powerful entities, as it would be nearly impossible for him to reach the other universes without the help of Whis. An option would be to let everyone in the universe know of me, so my name would even resound even in distant places. Someone unrivaled in the universe. Wouldn't Beerus and Whis come to me on their own violation? From there, it would be easy to find new challenges. Broly could reach the other universes and challenge their strongest. Of course, I need to treat this carefully, since Beerus could just erase me in an emotional outburst. I am not even close to them in power now, but later that wasn't just a fantasy of him. This became his plan. I will establish a kingdom and extend my influence across the universe. I will bring order to this universe, and you are invited to join my quest. The others were shocked by his sudden exclamation. He didn't propose a joint alliance, but wanted to rule over them and extend his influence across the universe. Wouldn't that mean he wanted to rule it? Some wanted to directly deny this preposterous claim, but it was stuck in their throat. They already saw a glimpse of his power. His strength was unbelievable, and he was growing with no end in sight. What if he actually manages to become the ruler of this universe? Wouldn't this early entry mean they would have a solid position in this newly established kingdom? These thoughts ran through their mind. Even if the races were at their peak, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. If he can't be stopped, why not join him? Many were still hesitant, as they wanted to keep their position as their absolute ruler, but this would extend their rule to a degree which they couldn't even dream of achieving. They all were leaders that had a degree of foresight, otherwise their races would have already crumbled under the pressure of the seas. This is not something done overnight. I will need a planet as my headquarters and operate from there. After I found it, I will let you know. Think about it until then. Broly stood up and left them behind. To be honest, they weren't much, power-wise, but it was about quantity if he wanted to operate on a universal level. With the few hundred Saiyans, he couldn't possibly think about establishing his kingdom, and the other races would be excellent to fill in the gap, at least in the beginning. The reason he wanted to establish a kingdom wasn't just to spread his name, it was about the fact that he wouldn't be able to do everything himself. He needed minions to do trivial and time-consuming jobs like acquiring the origin stones. The distance between them was too great and would take him years if he flew with a spaceship. Even with instant transmission, he needed ki to lock onto. Maybe he could find another teleportation method that just needs coordinates, but who could guarantee that he could find it, or someone who does know and is willing to teach? He wouldn't waste his time searching, and even if he learned some teleportation method that doesn't have that kind of limitations, subordinates would be still useful in many other ways. First things first, he wanted to take a visit to Earth for the Dragon Balls. He didn't know where New Namek was. The information Jine saved were from ages ago, and he would need an estimated 5 years to get to Earth. It would be year 763. Until then, Frieza would be already dead. With Din taking over the position as Kami, the Dragon Balls wouldn't lose out to the ones the Namekians created. Besides, the hyperbolic time chamber is too attractive on its own. In conclusion, the current priority is to get to Earth and get those wishes. Broly couldn't help but grin as he thought about his future. He went to the celebration and ate his belly full. Now it was time to relax. There would be plenty of time to think about everything once he flew through space. The next morning, Broly woke up early. He saw Kana naked laying on his chest. Aaliyah was sleeping in her room. She was still embarrassed what happened the morning before. Broly already thought about it. She would be more prone to sleep here if she was exhausted. I need to sleep with her every day now, so she can get used to waking up with Kana and me. Broly grinned wistfully. He quietly snuck out of bed and headed to the City Lord's library. Sir Broly. The librarian bowed respectfully as he welcomed Broly. Give me everything. Excuse me, sir? I want every technique in this library as a digital copy. Ahem. Sir, I don't think I can authorize that. The librarian was starting to sweat. He couldn't afford the man in front of him, but he can't just hand out every technique. Those were only accessible with credit points. Fine, call the City Lord. Broly said, annoyed. Even though he could understand the librarian's point, he could take it by force, but this would shine bad light on him, making the other leaders more unlikely to comply later if they think of him as a tyrant. After a short moment, the City Lord arrived at the entrance. My disciple wants to rob me, the City Lord said with a fake concerned expression. It will be a long time in the spaceship. Can't only train my body without improving anything else, now can I? Indeed. The more knowledge you gain, the stronger you become. The reason why I am troubled is because it would have been my farewell gift. Sigh. Now I have to think of something else. Haha. Don't worry, I will just see it as a prematurely given gift. The City Lord grinned and spoke to the librarian. All right, give him what he wants. And Broly, I have a request to you. Oh, I won't promise anything. If it is within my capabilities, I will do it. Thank you. It shouldn't be too difficult for you. I want you to find my niece. Find your niece? You know the universe is big. It would be difficult to find a person out there. Broly said with an awkward smile. He wanted to help. After all, the City Lord has helped him greatly since he was small. But to find someone in the universe, that's difficult, nearly impossible. Even if it is his master, he couldn't waste his time for a near impossible request. You don't have to worry about that. I know where she is being imprisoned, but with my strength, it would be impossible to get her out. Well, that makes it easy. I am listening. Broly inwardly released a sigh of relief. It wouldn't leave a good taste in his mouth if he had to deny his request, but if it was strength, he was confident that he would be able to survive almost everywhere in the universe. Rather, it would be even better if it could threaten him. Yes, it happened a long time ago. She and her friends were powerful and became arrogant, leading to them becoming pirates. In the end, they were individually locked inside a distant planet. I will send you the data later. They are locked in there for centuries already, so it doesn't matter if you take your time. And if it is possible, it would be good if you could leave her friends alive, since there aren't many of my kind left. Of course, if you have to, just kill them. I only care about my niece. No problem. What is her name and how does she look like? Broly had premonition of who it could be. In the end, he only knew of one female Hera survivor. Her name was Zangya. Chapter 73. I have to leave. Of course it is her. Broly thought. She has long, curly orange hair and like all of us bluish skin and eyes. She is 165 centimeters tall. The City Lord even had a picture ready to show. Who sealed her away? Broly faked ignorance. He didn't really care that the Kai sealed her away, but it would be weird if he didn't ask about the culprits. The city lord smiled bitterly. Sigh. The four Kais, who govern one quadrant of the universe respectively, combined their powers and sealed her away. They are deities that are said to live in the other world. I know it is a lot to ask from you to go against gods for a pirate like her, but I dash. Don't worry about it. Just give me the location, and before we meet again I will have rescued her. I will notify you immediately after I did. Thank you, Broly. It means a lot to me. The city lord couldn't help but smile at Broly's promise. By the way, you said that they were sealed away, but how can I unseal them? Do you have a technique for that, or can I use force? You can just use force. They are all sealed inside a planet, which keeps them from moving, but the reason I couldn't get them out was because of the barrier around the solar system. It even prevents light from getting out, so it was hard to locate. Besides the fact that they reside on their individual planet, I don't know what is beyond that barrier. Alright, no problem. Sir, you're out data, the librarian said, and gave Broly a small card. He took it and placed it on his tablet. After a few moments, all techniques were copied and saved on his tablet. Thanks. I will be going now, Master. I need to discuss something with the other Saiyans, but I expect that we will leave in the next few days. Alright, take care. Maybe the time until we will see us again will be even longer than your journey. I hope you will take care of my niece until then. Of course I will. I just hope you don't miss me too much. Ha ha ha, Broly smiled, as he turned around and left while waving his hand. The city lord had a smile on his face before he disappeared from the spot. Broly entered the headquarters and all the Saiyans, be it young or old, men or women, bowed and greeted him as he passed by them. He directly entered the meeting room for the heads of the departments. They were already discussing something. As soon as he entered, they stood up and bowed as they greeted him. Your Majesty. Broly, come here, we are discussing your coronation. What color do you want the carpet to be, and what about the lightning? Jine was happily babbling on about the coronation, while Daz beside her was smiling wryly. Daz and his crew members were probably the only ones that dared to directly call him by name. Although Broly didn't really care whether they called him with a title or not, this of course didn't include people he didn't befriend. Red and more bright. Anyway, I am not here for the coronation. I want to talk about what we are going to do next. Broly made sure that everyone was listening before continuing. To be honest, I want our race to be off this planet soon. There are probably some that still feel threatened by our strength. If they get out before we do, we might end up being trapped here again, and we aren't really adequate for scientific researches. To prevent accidents to happen, we will leave as soon as possible. Call back every Saiyan and we will take off as soon as they have gathered. Already done, Broly. I called everyone back since the results from the mission came in. I thought you might want to leave quickly. Daz reported. Good. What about the spaceship? Is it able to take us all for long distances? Broly looked at Krez, who was newly appointed as the head of the Department of Trade and was responsible for gathering supplies and build a ship for them to leave on. Broly was only informed after he got back from his journey that they already had plans to send out Saiyans en masse before they even began to search for a rift. Yes, the spaceship is already done. We have more than enough place for everyone. Around 1,000 rooms and gravity chambers. We are only around 434, so there is no problems considering space. Our supplies we have gathered so far is also enough for a few years-long journey. Considering the amount we eat, we will most likely have to replenish once on the way. Alright. Do we already have a planet from our past data that we could immigrate to in mind? Yes, we have searched after a planet with preferable high gravity and capable of harboring life, but with no civilization. There are around 124 planets we could live on in the Milky Way galaxy. Considering your condition that it needs to be close to planet Earth, there is only one planet we could stay on. The Saiyan responsible for searching a planet pressed on the panel and a picture popped open, revealing a huge green, bluish planet. The data on the side revealed that it was around 5 times the gravity of planet Vegeta. It was a beautiful planet with perfect conditions. The problem was that a scan in the past revealed that there are powerful creatures dwelling on it, making everyone apprehensive from invading it. Of course, the Saiyans now were on a whole new level. They weren't afraid of the threat this planet posed. Jine looked at Broly and whispered to him, "You said that it should be close to Earth? Why? Don't you want to see your son?" Broly grinned at her. He wasn't going to tell her that he wanted to use the Dragon Balls, as he shouldn't have any knowledge about them. Jine understandably took it as Broly's consideration of her. Now before we talk about the coronation, I have to tell you that I am not going to leave on the same ship as you. I already have a personal ship and will steer towards another planet I have business on. I will arrive on our new planet a few months later. Until I have arrived, I count on you to establish yourselves on there. If you face major problems, send a distress signal to me. I will arrive as soon as I can. Thereafter they were organizing the coronation, until a few hours later. It was settled that tomorrow morning, Broly would be crowned, and he would leave immediately afterwards on his personal ship. The Saiyans would be leaving shortly after as well. In the evening, Broly sparred with Zinjo, Blitz and Yanari and hinted on his soon departure. He also had some words with Vara and Violet before he went towards his own training room. The sign was green, so he just entered. He saw that Aaliyah, Kana, Taro and Ace were sparring with each other. His room already became the place where they would gather, since Broly would never reject a spar and they always wanted to fight. If they didn't find him, they would just spar with each other.
Yo.
Mind if I join? Surprised by the sudden voice, they turned towards him. Hey, Broly, finally done with your errands? Kana said cheekily. Yes, and it seems I have to leave for a few years tomorrow. Broly grinned. Kana furrowed her eyebrows. Now that's a mean joke. Not a joke. In fact, you will leave tomorrow as well. You and every other Saiyan are going to migrate to another planet, while I need to leave for another planet. They were stunned. They could tell that he was serious. Ace was the first to speak again. Understood, but don't forget that you would appoint me an elite group. Ace had asked him that after he heard that Broly would become king. He wanted to establish an unrivaled elite crew that would take on the most difficult missions. Of course, Broly agreed that he would give him the best seedlings to train. The next time you will see me, I will be beyond your reach. Ha 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 ha, Taro boasted shamelessly. They both knew that their race needed a few strong people to account for the unexpected. As Super Saiyans, this task would fall into their hands. It would hit Aaliyah and Kana harder if they had to leave, so the two immediately jumped forward to accompany the other Saiyans. Aaliyah and Kana smiled gratefully at them, before turning to Broly. You are not leaving without us, they said in unison. Broly smiled happily. He hoped they wanted to accompany him on his travel. Chapter 74, Coronation. Broly went ahead and embraced the two. He gave them both a passionate deep kiss. Taro and Ace awkwardly looked at each other before they left the three on their own. Broly squatted down and picked both of them up with one arm each and sprinted towards his room. After seconds they arrived. Broly quickly locked the door and threw the two on the bed. Hey everyone. The next scene is NSFW, not safe for work. Unfortunately, it cannot be included in this video because of YouTube's policies. However, if you're interested, a full, unfiltered version of this chapter is available on my Patreon page. You can find the link in the description below. I understand if this content isn't for everyone, so no worries if you prefer to stick with the YouTube safe version. But for those who are curious or want to support the channel further, Patreon is the place to go. Thanks for your understanding, and let's get back to the story. The next morning, as always, Kana tried to tease Aaliyah, but after the night, it seemed like she grew another layer of skin. They quickly cleaned up and readied themselves for the coronation. The two girls already left to attend it like the rest of the Saiyans. Broly chose to wear his usual outfit, the one with the red sash and the golden ornaments. It gave him a more royal feeling. The clothes were gifted to him from Aaliyah and Kana. They were almost as durable as his battle armor, but it didn't absorb shock from attacks like his armor does. At his level, it was already unnecessary to care about armor though, as they were almost a non-existing factor in a battle. It was only good for surprise attacks when he doesn't pay attention, making assassinations more difficult. Of course, this would only apply for normal Saiyans, as he had an unbelievable tenacious body, which wouldn't be hurt by simple attacks. Hit from Universe 6 would still be able to kill him in one hit, as he can even compete with Super Saiyan God, but there was no such person in this universe. At least Broly hasn't heard of a famous Universe 7 assassin. Without thinking about it anymore, he made his way to the Saiyans headquarters. There was no one outside roaming around. As he headed to the hall where the coronation would happen, he opened the door and was greeted by a crowd of 400-plus Saiyans. Only Saiyans were present, as this was deemed a holy tradition. Broly walked along the red carpet between the two halves of the crowd. He saw Jine, Taro, Ace, Aaliyah and Kana at the very front smiling at him. Aaliyah even gave him a thumb and Kana pointed at him, herself, and then thrusted her hips forwards almost unnoticeably. He almost laughed out loud, but didn't let it show on his face. He looked at the crown. 16 years ago, he died being robbed in an alleyway. After reviving inside Broly's body, he had faced numerous challenges and almost died as a toddler. He had woken up on a strange planet with countless difficulties, but he had overcome them and grew stronger rapidly. Now 16 years later, he was being crowned the new king of the race that took him in. From here on onwards, he would lead this race to a glorious future. His journey has just begun. Broly climbed upwards and was greeted as per tradition by the strongest warrior of the oldest generation, Daz. He carried a golden crown on a small red pillow. We, the warrior race, Saiyans, only respect and accept one kind as our king. The strongest. Does anyone claim this title from Broly's dead hands? Silence. No one dared to challenge the most talented their race has seen for a millennium to a death battle. If that is the case, Broly, hereby you represent the whole race. Let your path bring glory and power. Daz placed the crown on top of Broly's head. Thud. Every Saiyan kneeled on one knee, while facing the ground. Broly turned around and saw the scene before him. His figure suddenly started to bulk up as he transformed into a 2.9-meter tall monster with yellow eyes. An unbearable pressure was released from his body. He single-handedly suppressed every single Saiyan in the hall. Broly announced his acceptance in a deep, booming voice. I am King Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan. Hooray! Hail King Broly! Hail your majesty! Long live the king! Shouts filled the hall as the Saiyans welcomed a new king, a legend, whose destiny was to surpass all. Broly stood at the door of his spaceship as he gazed back towards his people, which only had worship in their eyes. He quietly entered his ship and closed the door. He headed inside and saw Leah and Kana grinning brightly at him. He couldn't help but smile as well. By the way, who is flying? Broly asked, confused. Oh crap, I will fly, no worries. Aaliyah quickly ran towards the cockpit and started steering the spaceship at the rift. You can fly? Broly asked as he entered the room. Yeah, Violet showed me the basics. The steering was made easy as well, so even I could fly it. Besides, for the most part, we will use the autopilot. In space, the ship distorted until it disappeared from the spot. They carefully flew through the rift until they safely came out on the other side. Aaliyah turned her head towards Broly. So which planet are we heading to? Broly went to the panel and typed in the coordinates. A bluish frozen planet popped up. This is our first destination. Chapter 75, Restraints. So what business do you have there? Aaliyah asked, confused. The planet didn't seem to hold any life and was basically a frozen block in space. Hee. On my journey, I have acquired a map with locations of origin crystals. This planet is not far off course of my real destination and holds an energy crystal. There are crystals on other planets? Aaliyah inquired. Yes, there are 3 of every kind spread throughout the universe. You have to use a different circulation method for each of them. I will show you how it is done as we travel. Ha ha ha, but you will only get the scraps. Broly shamelessly exclaimed. You are so mean. We are your wives. Aaliyah shyly said. Broly, don't mind the crystals. I want something else. Kana embraced Broly from behind, slowly guiding her hand from his abs down. I want what Aaliyah had yesterday. I want it in the ass. She whispered into his ear, before giving it a light bite. Aaliyah heard this and started blushing, as her eyes became unfocused and started breathing more heavily. Broly turned around and saw Kana only in her underwear. Why are you half naked? Broly spoke with a coarse voice. Well, it is only us 3. We can do it everywhere, and whenever we want. Clothes would only slow down the act. Hee. Kana bit her lip and looked at him seductively. She knew how to arouse Broly. He gulped hard, before he picked up her clothes and pushed them into her hands. We will only do it once a day, but the rest of the time, we will spend training. Kana saw the seriousness in the statement, so she dejectedly dressed up again. Aaliyah observed the two and inwardly thought that although Broly was serious, he didn't say it with his usual unwavering determination. There would be room to move, and with his kind of libido, it would not be weird if they did it 3 to 4 times, maybe even more. She suddenly felt something poke her cheek. She turned to see Broly poking her cheek with his finger. You two. I want you both to be vastly stronger after these 5 years. You understand? Now there really was no room for negotiations. Sigh. Of course, we will get vastly stronger, if you don't break us with your pent-up emotions. Without hesitation, she put his finger in her mouth and started wrapping her tongue around it. Broly saw her suck his finger. Oh boy, this will be harder than expected. Kana grinned slyly as she saw this and seemingly read Broly's thoughts. Alright, I turned on the autopilot. It will take us a bit over 5 years to reach the Milky Way galaxy and this planet. Aaliyah suddenly exclaimed, pulling Broly out of his thoughts. That is longer than I expected. Could you show me the star map? Yeah, sure. Here you go. A star map with their position being a blinking dot showed up on the display. Why are we way out of here to the side? Broly was confused as he looked at the map. This didn't look like this when we looked into space from Perditus. Did our view change because of the distorted space? You are right. We should have been a year further away from the boundary. Aaliyah furrowed her eyebrows. Send the data to the ball I have left at the exit of the rift, so the others are in the know. Already sending. Also change our route to this place. Broly typed in other coordinates, but it looked like empty space. There is nothing there, Broly. Aaliyah, of course, was confused, seeing him want to steer towards nothing. The city lord had asked me to save his niece, and she is trapped somewhere around there. I first wanted to do it later as it would have cost us almost 2 years of time to head in the opposite direction and back, but now it is only slightly off course. I can bear a month delay. His niece? Can you show me how she looks like? Sure. A picture of a beautiful female Hera was displayed on the screen. Aaliyah thought about something as her face became gloomier. Kana's expression became also more solemn. Are you guys all right? Broly asked as the room became silent. It is nothing. You wanted to train, right? Broly, go ahead. I have something to discuss with Aaliyah. Kana seemed to have thought of something. She pushed Broly outside and closed the door. Aaliyah, this is serious. We have to teach him to control himself. What do you mean? I can't even control myself. Aaliyah was anxious at the thought to have another female on this spaceship with the wild beast that is called Broly. Just throw the thoughts of extra rounds out of your mind. And Anin, do it really only once. Won't this just make him hornier if he can't release it? I heard of a proverb of making a man happy. It is something about keeping a man's belly full and his balls empty. Aaliyah questioned this method. She only had sex once and then had a break for one day, which already frustrated her. Where did you get that proverb from?
Vora.
She's a succubus. Of course they have weird proverbs. Well, she said they didn't even have sex every day and not as long. She also said she isn't that hardcore. You told her about your sex? You can't just brag about it. I am together with the same man. I just wanted some advices and I thought it would be good to ask an expert. I thought you wouldn't mind, as you know. You were pretty open about that stuff. Sorry. Aaliyah realized that although it was her having sex, she still shared Broly with Kana. She couldn't just assume Kana's standpoint on things that concerned the three of them. She should be more careful what she says in the future, Aaliyah thought. That's only between us three. Sigh. Anyway, we have another month until then. We are going to teach him some restraints. We will deny him sex for a few days, then let him release everything at once. It should help him restrain his urges and make it a habit for him to go days without it, but also keeping him satisfied. I see. Makes sense. Let's do that. They firmly grasped their hands, believing in their plan. They just haven't realized that Broly rarely approaches them on his own. It is true that he indulges in the moment when in bed, but he had perfect control over his urges if he wanted to. They went into the training room with Broly and were almost crushed by the gravity. They had to turn into Super Saiyan to endure it. For the next hours they had an intense workout, followed by an intense workout. The next morning, they were laying covered in sweat and white liquid, as they embraced Broly in the middle, happily smiling as they slept content, completely forgetting what they planned the day before. In the next morning, Broly investigated a sound he heard in the storage room. He saw something wriggle under a blanket. He pulled it away and saw a small white ball blinking blue with arms and lenses that looked like eyes. It was one of the repairs and maintenance robots he had asked from one of the top scientists on the whole planet Perditus. He was very satisfied and grateful to them, as they managed to improve and create the things he had asked of them. He again entered the training room and looked at the options he could choose. A gravity up to 2000, temperature changes from -100 to 500 Celsius. Flying robots unaffected by the gravity that constantly shoot out lasers at the target. Flying needles, spears, and blades coming out of the walls and ground. The room resembled a death trap more than everything else. He wanted to use these things mostly to train his instinct. It was to prepare him, so he could one day gain Ultra Instinct. The weapons and robots weren't releasing any energy, making it impossible to sense them through their ki or life force. He could also configure the room, so it would only target him and not Aaliyah or Kana. He readied himself for a hellish training. Fortunately, with his influence he had acquired thousands of healing capsules. He also had some seeds and hundreds of the fruit of might itself. He had already prepared not to waste any time on this trip. He also thought the intimate time he spent with Kana and Aaliyah as important as his workout regime. It would give him something to vent and relax his mental state. He didn't want to be as grumpy as Vegeta. There had to be a reason why he slowly calmed down after he settled with Bulma and spent more time with her. Well, his grumpy attitude was probably mostly his nature, but still, Broly's natural urges weren't something he wanted to suppress. It helped him keep balance, and it made him happy. Of course, there was something as too excessive, but he wouldn't let his body dictate who he is. He controlled his body and not the other way around. Chapter 76, Workout. For the next month they had a fixed routine. Every day they would wake up and clean the bedroom. They had breakfast and slowly started their workout afterwards. Broly started his routine with an intense powerlifting workout under 1400x gravity, all in his base form. The girls stayed in the same room, but were barely able to lift their fingers as they were crushed into the ground. Broly forbade them to turn Super Saiyan, so they suffered under the gravity in their base form while their only objective was to survive. Usually they wouldn't come out unharmed. With several broken bones, they almost always needed to take a healing capsule to recover. They could have trained in their own training room, as his ship had 5. This room and another had the same modifications, while the rest were simple gravity rooms. The weights and the rooms themselves were all made out of the material from the underground base, which enabled them to sustain the harsh conditions inside the rooms. Broly also always wore weights on his ankles and wrists, which were each 100 kilograms. They just looked like oversized wrist and ankle bands. His green-black armor was around 350 kilograms. It was made with the last cutting-edge technology, so it wouldn't obstruct his movements. In all, he looked like he normally did in his armor, just with red weights on his hands and feet. After that powerlifting workout, there would be a lunch break. which was the time the girls needed to recover with a healing capsule. Thereafter, they would split up in 2 groups. If Broly didn't especially ask them to move into the other special room, they would have likely wanted to stay inside his room. Broly found it strange that they were so obsessed to stay with him as long as possible, but he didn't think much about it. Anyway, they went inside their room together, while he stayed inside his normal training room. He activated 5 flying robots and 1,500 times gravity. He dodged their attacks using everything he could, bouncing off the walls or the ground, while trying to get closer to them. They were programmed to evade his approaches while attacking him. To successfully complete this workout, he needed to endure at least an hour, and then he had to press a bean-sized button on the back of the robots and turn them all off. After he did that, he activated them again and did the same as before, only with the additional needles that would randomly fly out of the walls. After completing that workout segment, he would turn all the options on, making it almost impossible for him to stay at one place longer than a fraction of a second, forcing him into the air. Broly knew that most high-level battles would require abnormal reactions to all kinds of attacks, so he focused a major part of his training to dodge high-frequency attacks coming from all sides. The blades swiping out of the walls were forcing him away from the ground and into the air. This would prove useful for the future, as most fights wouldn't happen on ground but in the air. He also used this to hone his other senses to an unbelievable degree. Key sense would be almost negligible for him in battle, so this would help him to locate his opponent through his other senses. He could also feel his body reacting on its own to some degree, but Broly knew that this was still light years away from the overpowered Ultra Instinct. This segment of his routine was unpassable for the Broly now, and would be unpassable for a long time, as he adjusted the conditions if he realized that it became easier. For example, he would increase the numbers of robots or needle output. There was also the option to increase the reaction of the blades and spears targeting him. The temperature changes weren't as extreme as the high gravity, but it still put heavy burdens on the body and his mental state. It was also for him to let his body adapt to various environmental conditions without losing any battle capabilities. His training regime was harsh to say the least. Most of the time it was this segment where he would collapse as soon as he gets out of the room, with numerous cuts and burns on his body. Of course, if he wanted to, he could just turn Super Saiyan or even his base plus Ozaru form, which he called Akari, to prevent any injuries. But he wanted to push himself to his limits, until the brink of death. He figured that he should train as crazily as ever, now better than later. It would be a shame if he naturally grew in power, making the room harmless to him without exploiting this room to train his movements and experience. It would not be the same if he knew that these things couldn't hurt him, so he put in his all now. After training his strength and movements, it was time to integrate them into his combat style. First, the 3 would take another eating break, with the girls taking another healing capsule, before they went inside the room again. Aaliyah and Kana were fighting him alongside 2 robots he wasn't allowed to turn off. They trained under 1500x gravity, which burdened Broly heavily. After the whole day of intense workout, he was already beat, and he hadn't taken a healing capsule, but relied on his natural recovery. The girls were also allowed to go mastered Super Saiyan, while Broly could go Akari to train his mastery in it. This battle would always push him into a corner, where he would try to resist as long as possible. The multiplier of a Super Saiyan, who had completely mastered it, was no joke. He estimated that it would multiply their power up to 100x times. If they used the Ascended Super Saiyan, SSJ2, which is 2 times as strong as Super Saiyan full power, it would be a 200x multiplier to their base. With his Akari form, which currently boosts his base 8-fold, he was able to hold his ground against the 2 in their mastered Super Saiyan plus the robots. If one would convert their base strength at the end of the month into power levels, Aaliyah and Kana would be hovering on the same level, which was around 250 million. Broly was around 4 billion. When Broly was fighting against their Super Saiyan as an Akari, Aaliyah and Kana would hover around 25 billion, and he around 32 billion. Broly knew that according to the series he should be already unrivaled in the universe, but he couldn't help but seriously doubt that. Zangya and Broly himself, they weren't in the main series, but he and she still existed in this universe. What does that mean about the strength of the universe? If Broly only looked at the main anime and manga series, there were rarely strong individuals, to the point that the series even went beyond the universe. Even the movies themselves mostly don't connect to each other. Now with him and Zangya existing together, it meant that it was entirely possible that the other villains and many more experts hidden in the depth of the universe, which weren't integrated in the main story, existed here. With more experts swaggering around the universe, it would be impossible for them to be as weak as stated in the story. Frieza shouldn't even come close to rule a major part of the universe with his meager power level of 120 million. Maybe Frieza could rule a part of the galaxy, but the universe? With all the experts out there, that would just be a wet dream. Even a human could come up with 2 cyborgs, number 18 and number 17, who could slap this emperor of the universe to death. Of course, that is degrading the genius that is Dr. Gero, but would he be the only one in the entire universe with thousands of civilizations able to come up with a cyborg or android of similar strength? Probably not. which only begs the question, how strong these experts here really are. Every time Broly thought about it, he became more excited. Ha ha ha, the stronger they are the better. It would be boring otherwise. After they were done with sparring, they would eat again and would spend a few hours meditating. Broly would also examine the two girls' cells and life force for any hidden damages and help them fix it if they had any. For the night they would shower or bath together, which sometimes led to a sweaty and steamy battle in the bedroom, but usually they would not even bother to move out of the bathroom and get right into the action. After a month of this hellish training, they finally arrived at the coordinates given by the city lord. They slowed down and observed the seemingly empty space. From the data Broly got, they had to be careful not to fly right into the barrier, destroying their ship. Broly quickly took on his battle armor and a mouthpiece meant for breathing. Broly could use his life force and ki to replace the basic needs for his body, but if he could use a simple mouthpiece to breath, why would he waste his life force for something like this? Dressed up, he was ready to move out. Chapter 77. Breaking the Seal. Broly flew a bit away from the spaceship. He charged up a ki sphere in his hand and threw it forward. After a couple of seconds of it crossing the empty space like a shooting star, it collided with something and a gigantic explosion dispersed the empty and filled it with bright light and scorching heat. It looked like a massive dying sun as it slowly faded away. Broly saw his attack distorting space, and at the place where his attack collided with something, he only saw a black wall. He was only able to see it as the energy unnaturally dispersed to the side instead of evenly in all directions. The wall seemed to span endlessly, but from the information he got it only covered a solar system. He couldn't help but marvel at the expense the Kais took to seal this group of pirates away. The seal was being sustained by their planets. This would mean they used several planets just to seal them away. Broly thought it was stupid that they put so much effort into this seal, but was easily broken if one planet, that was part of the seal, was destroyed. It is not like just anybody can reach their planet, as it was located in the other world. Only friends or the dead would know their exact location. Well, they probably didn't think a friend would teleport a bomb towards one of them and blew himself and the planet up. He stopped pondering over this and started transforming. An abnormal amount of ki was being released as his body grew and his hair changed spiky green. He was surrounded by a green flame-like aura as he gazed at the wall with his yellow eyes. The space distorted around him as green lightning popped into existing. The ship behind him was heavily wobbling and trembling. It looked like a boat caught in a storm out in the ocean. Quick, measure his power level, Kana shouted as he saw Broly transform. Already on it. The numbers on the screen started rising until it stopped at 2,400 energy level, EL, which would be 2,400 billion calculated into power level.
1 billion PL.
Considering that Broly's base was a 4 billion, it would mean that in his legendary Super Saiyan plus Ikari, he was 600x times stronger. Aaliyah and Kana were shocked, since they could only feel that he was vastly stronger, but by how much they previously had no clue. Now presented with the numbers, they knew that even if they were as strong as Broly in their base, they would still be absolutely demolished by him. They also remembered hearing Broly say that his legendary state was not at its limit yet, which would mean that it would amplify his strength even further in the future. This also confused them since Broly said that his Ikari multiplies his strength by 8, which would mean that his legendary transformation only multiplies by 75x. Broly of course didn't know that he shocked and confused the two behind him, as he focused massive amount of ki inside his hand. His hand started glowing in a green hue. With his other hand he seemed to grab the energy and pull it out. Solid green ki emerged out of his hand as he pulled the energy out until it reached 3 meters in length. In his hand was a green spear, with a cross-shaped tip that crackled like lightning and distorted space by mere existing. Broly put his hand holding the spear behind his head as he went into a throwing position. His green flame-like aura crawled over his arm into the spear. The spearhead started shining in a green light. Broly took a deep breath as he still focused his energy into the spear. Thunder Spear. Why was it called Thunder Spear? Because of the boom it made when thrown. With an explosion, the spear teared through space as it headed towards the wall. A seemingly solid green line was left behind from the spear as it flew with an unbelievable and unstoppable pace. Not even Broly could follow the spear as it was too fast for him to grasp. A technique he developed on his journey after seeing a comet pierce through a mountainside. At that moment he thought about creating a technique that could pierce through anything. It was his strongest hitting move he had created to this date. He believed that even the gods wouldn't want to meet it head-on. Of course, he hasn't experienced the might of the god of destruction yet, but he was still confident in this technique. The only thing that happened after he fired his spear was the barrier shattering into countless bits from the point where the path of light collided with it. The moment of collision between spear and barrier was not noticed by them as the spear didn't slow down at all in the face of the barrier, making the piercing moment impossible for them to see. The barrier slowly vanished into nothingness and revealed the sight behind it. A singular star system with 5 planets devoid of life. One of them had a gigantic hole right in the middle, breaking the planet into pieces. A green line still lingered around as it pierced through the broken planet's middle and beyond with no end in sight. Oh crap. Please don't be Zhangya's planet. Please don't be Zhangya's planet. He had severely overestimated the barrier and underestimated his technique. It was, after all, his first time firing it at full strength. Aaliyah and Kana stepped outside with a breathing mouthpiece each and activated the cloaking function of the ship. It seemingly vanished from place, but was just undetectable for the naked eye. The three then flew towards the broken planet. Although Broly doubted that a corpse would remain if he had really hit the person inside the planet, it wouldn't hurt to see. Maybe they weren't located inside like the City Lord proclaimed, but somewhere on it. At a closer range, he looked over the debris with his life force vision on, but even after a while, he couldn't find any signals of a single living creature on this wasteland of a planet. Whoever was on this planet was instantly killed and pulverized by his attack. Well, this makes a friendly approach much more difficult. Broly smiled bitterly. Why do you always have to escalate things? Aaliyah complained. Cough. Only this once I did an oopsie. Next time I won't go all out. On another note, as I observed you in your legendary state, does your dick grow too in your transformation? Kana said with slight anticipation in her voice. I think so. Awkwardly admitted. Of course, that was one of the first things he checked when he transformed. What if it expanded too much, hurting his member, but it didn't seem to cause any trouble? Hee. Kana grinned lewdly, and even drooled a bit as she looked at him, or rather his crotch. Broly felt awkward being stared at her, even though it wasn't the first time. He quickly reverted to his base form. Let's just hope I didn't kill her. Sigh. In the other world, in 4 different planets in 4 different cardinal directions, the same thing happened on all of them. The whole planet started trembling. It was a worldwide earthquake that shook the planet. After a few minutes, the planets stopped shaking, returning to the peace they had previously. These, of course, were the planets of the Kais. One of the planets was particularly affected as it was the smallest and the weakest link of the seal, which caused the earthquake to be much more severe. The North Kai was obviously startled by the sudden earthquake and panicked as he ran through his house trying to stop everything from breaking. Bubbles the monkey and the grasshopper Gregory were holding each other as they waited for the earthquake to calm down. Wah, what was that? No matter how long they waited afterwards, the earthquake didn't return, and North Kai pondered hard about what could have happened, as it was impossible for his planet to cause an earthquake. After a while, his face became gloomy. There can only be one thing that could cause something like this to happen. Could it be? Did he somehow manage to escape? He went out of his house onto the grass. With his arms behind his back, his antennae started twitching as he searched through the place of his memory. Oh no, the seal is broken. He pried further and looked onto the planets, which turned his expression into a grimace. They managed to break free. This is bad. This universe is doomed. With those around, there will be only mayhem. Wait, who are those? He looked at a broken planet and found 3 Saiyans standing and quarreling with each other on some debris of a destroyed planet. What are those damn Saiyans doing there? I thought they were all killed by Frisia. He started observing them and tried to get a good look at their face until one of them suddenly turned around with piercing yellow eyes. North Kai, frightened, retracted his senses. Did he notice me? He shuddered at the thought that someone can sense his prying. I have to give notice to the Galactic King of the Milky Way. Maybe he has someone in his ranks that could deal with them, even though I highly doubt that. Is something wrong, Broly? Aaliyah asked concernedly as she saw Broly turn around abruptly and turn into his Ikari form. Nothing. Must have been wind. The wind? This planet's atmosphere is long gone. Cough. Anyway, let's go to the other planets. Chapter 78, Bojack. They started to fly into space again. They headed towards the biggest planet. On their way, they saw 3 figures flying from their respective planets towards the biggest one in the solar system they were heading to as well. They looked at each other and quickly accelerated. A short moment later, they arrived and hovered in the sky as they looked down. The 3 were waiting for a figure who climbed out of the ground. The Saiyans slowly landed a few tens of meters away of them while being watched by the other group. Who are you? The tallest of them said. This was evidently Bojack, a muscular build with bluish-colored skin, long orange hair, a scar across his face, and 2.2 meters tall, which about the same height as Broly's base. We are here to pick you up, Broly said with a neutral face. Pick us up? Ha ha ha. Didn't know we had Saiyan admirers. The dash. We are not admirers. Come, let's not waste time and go. Admirer? Me? In your dreams. Who do you think you are? You think you can just interrupt Bojack, the future emperor of this universe? Bujin, the smallest of them with a turban on his head, flared out. Broly only looked at him like he was an idiot. Seeing this, Bujin wanted to attack him but was quickly stopped by Bojack. We still have to wait for our comrade Kogu. He should arrive. Dash. Broly had a bitter smile on his face. There were some mishaps and he unfortunately died, but he died an honorable death.
Broly blatt antli liet.
You, Bujin, who was on edge from before, finally lost it and shot towards Broly. Bojack didn't stop him this time. He was first apprehensive as they were seemingly the ones who could break the seal that held them for hundreds of years. They shouldn't be weak, but now they already killed one of them. Although he didn't care much about Kogu, it was too humiliating to be interrupted twice while being casually told that he had disposed someone of his race. How could he endure this humiliation? He would not rest until he toyed these arrogant Saiyans to death. Bojack signaled the others to follow Bujin. Bujin unleashed a fiery sequence of punches, but he couldn't hit Broly at all. How is this possible? He quickly distanced himself and released his psycho threads. Broly didn't move at all as he observed this familiar technique. Before it could reach Broly, Bujin was forced away by a ki blast from Aliyah. Zangya and Baido, another member with a mohawk hairstyle, redirected their attacks towards Kana and Aliyah. Bujin somehow felt that he wouldn't stand a chance against the giant Saiyan, so he joined the others in attacking the females. Bojack had a sneer on his face. So what? You may have broken the barrier, but you are still no match against this mighty Hera. Bojack firmly believed that there was no other race that could compete with them, especially this so-called warrior race Saiyans. He accelerated and dashed straight at Broly and threw a punch. Broly easily evaded it by tilting his head. Bojack quickly followed with rapid punches and kicks, but Broly was just like a wind in the leaf, completely evading every attack of his. Bojack distanced himself, and his ki started to rise. His blue jacket was torn apart by the sudden expansion of muscles. His skin turned green and his hair red. He transformed like the City Lord. Surprisingly, it wasn't only a multiplier of 3x, but 5x times, which didn't impress Broly at all after the initial surprise that it was higher than the City Lord's. Maybe it has something to do with his age? He is after all pretty old. It would be no surprise if his battle capabilities decreased with age. It could also be that he just isn't as bodily able like Bojack. After all, he likes to study more than to train. Seeing Broly completely unfazed and seemingly thinking about something else while they were fighting pissed him off. You bastard. He rushed at Broly. After transforming, he wasn't faster by much, but his strength increased massively. It was still futile as he was unable to hit Broly. Broly estimated that Bojack's power level after transforming should be around 8.5 billion, which surprised him a bit. After all, Bojack should be around Perfect Cell's level, which would mean that Super Perfect Cell should be around 15 plus billion. Aliyah and Kana are only over 3 times stronger than Cell as a Super Saiyan 2? Seems like I have to take the training up a notch. After the increase of strength, he first wanted to go Akari, but after seeing his speed unable to perform at the power he showed, he thought about toying with him a bit. With just skill and instincts alone, he was evading almost every attack of Bojack. He only needed to block on occasion, which pleased Broly quite a bit. He was fighting someone who was over 2 times stronger than him, and the opponent was helplessly unable to cross the gap in skill. Although the speed wasn't on par with Bojack's strength, it was still faster than Broly's base form. Bojack put all his weight into one of his punch as he saw the opportunity to land a blow directly on Broly's face. Suddenly, the face tilted, evading the blow in the last moment, and suddenly approach him. Ugh. Bojack was sent flying into a rock formation, destroying it in his path and burying him underneath. Broly waited, not taking a single step until light shone between the cracks of the stones, before a shockwave flung them away. Ah! Bojack was breathing heavily as he pressed his hand on his stomach. His skin was torn open and bled at the spot where Broly landed his punch. Suddenly a figure intercepted their sight. The figure heavily crashed into the ground between them, breaking open the ground. The figure was Zangya. She slowly stood up while trembling and stepping backwards. She already had numerous cuts and bruises on her body. She obviously was brutally beaten up. Bojack stretched out his arms to the side and green energy gathered in his hands. Galactic Buster. Completely ignoring her figure in his path, he flung his 2 energy spheres. Broly squinted his eyes slightly as his body instantly buffed up and his eyes turned yellow. He disappeared from his spot only to re-emerge between the energy attack and the shocked Zangya. With a flick of his wrist, both spheres were deflected into space. Bojack didn't wait as he followed up with a punch. Seeing this, Broly became annoyed. He first wanted to beat them down, so they could have a more peaceful conversation afterwards. After all, he would have to take them inside his ship, so he needed to display his superior strength, and for pirates like them a bit of force to humble them was needed. They would easier listen to reason afterwards. But now, even after seeing the disparity in skill and strength, Bojack persisted. There is no room in my ship for an idiot like you. Broly thought as killing intent surfaced in his eyes. He just waited for the punch to reach his face. Bojack was about to rejoice seeing Broly not evade his punch. He used his energy attack as a distraction, but focused most of his strength into his fist. If it landed, it would be the end of this Saiyan. Ha ha ha. D. His fist landed on Broly's face and made a wonderful cracking sound. It took a second before the pain was transmitted to his brain. Bojack's hand was completely shattered. He was wincing in pain until he was picked up by the throat. He saw Broly pointing his other palm at him, and a green sphere emerged in it. Mercy, I didn't have dash. Before he could say anything else, Broly pressed the sphere against Bojack's chest. Bojack was pushed into the sky by the sphere before it illuminated the sky with a gigantic explosion. Bojack was instantly pulverized, never to be seen again. Zangya had a shocked expression until she sensed two people flying towards her from behind. She quickly turned around and saw those devilish Super Saiyans that decimated her group. Oh, you already done? The Saiyan who saved her turned around as he spoke towards the female Saiyans. All dead. I don't see them comply, especially when they are gathered. Aaliyah casually spoke. Didn't know you were this ruthless. Broly said, seemingly astounded. Aaliyah only rolled her eyes. I am a Saiyan and was badly influenced by my sparring partner. Besides, those were pirate scum. No good in keeping them alive. What should we do with her? Aaliyah looked at Zangya with indifferent eyes. She always gave that look to people he didn't like or were just strangers. Kana, on the other hand, had always kind eyes. But when mixed with dislike, she looked scarier than someone with killing intent. These gazes were thrown at the wounded girl. She lost her strength and shrank to the ground from their glares. She didn't know if it wouldn't have been better to die a moment ago. What cruel fate would await her with these people who obviously didn't like her? Broly came closer. He was a bit buffer in his Akari from, and his eyes scared her as they seemed to pierce one's body. He squatted down and slowly spoke in a deep, booming voice. You will behave, right? She, frustrated, bit her lips as she stared at the one who questioned her and was seemingly the leader of the group. She felt helpless in front of these people. She would have never imagined that someone as strong and beautiful like her would be degraded to a slave. She obviously misunderstood their intentions, since they didn't really explain anything. In the end, she reluctantly nodded. Chapter 79. Not that bad. A figure was lying on a bed contemplating her life. It has been a month since she was kidnapped by these lunatics. They had explained to her that they came for her. It was a request from her uncle to pick her up, which explained why they didn't hesitate to slaughter the others of her group. Her uncle always said to her that they were bad company. She sighed at the thought that her conquest was foiled before it started. She was the second strongest in the group, but she wasn't satisfied with that position. She wanted to rule, not be second to that murderous jackass named Bojack. She couldn't deny that Bojack was several times stronger than her. That was why she was loyal to him. In the beginning, she wanted to use his strength to kill the competition. She thought that since Bojack saw their race superior than every other race, she could just use her body to seduce him. Unfortunately, Bojack enjoyed snapping someone's neck more than everything else. It didn't really matter to her anymore, since Bojack was easily disposed of. The Saiyans picked her up and healed her. She also saw Broly checking her out, which gave rise to the thoughts to seduce him. But these thoughts were quickly killed before they could sprout. Why? Because of the sounds that kept her up at night. It was unbelievable how long they were going and how loud they became. By then she knew that she would only be one of many, as she could hardly kill the competition as they were far stronger than her. Besides, why would she degrade herself if she couldn't get any benefits from it? Additionally, the glares of the two female Saiyans made it clear that she wouldn't have a pleasant time if she made a move. She thought that if she couldn't make a move, she at least shouldn't endure the sounds they made. At one time she screamed at them through the wall to shut up, but Broly just laughed. Aaliyah muffled her moans a bit and Kana shamelessly kept going. After a month, she already was able to tell the difference between the two, which she wasn't proud of at all. Zangya was only able to sleep with earplugs while being buried under blanket and pillow, and accepted her fate. The only positive was that they were nice, if one ignored the cold stares of the two females. Broly also didn't force himself onto her or showed any interest after the initial size up, even though he kept going with the other two without stop, which weirdly frustrated her. The only thing they forced her to do was to participate in their training. They said that she needed to become stronger, so they don't have to protect her later on. Protect her? In the whole galaxy, there would hardly be anyone that could even approach her strength. She started telling them how easily she could decimate hundreds of groups, and that she already did before she was sealed away. How she dealt with frost demons. But instead of the awe she would usually get, they just shut her up disinterested. She wanted to argue how incredible her tails are, when she remembered that she was easily beaten up by them. Surprisingly, the training had good results. In the past, she would normally never train except for coordination, as their race was just naturally strong, and it was just too sweaty and straining. She also thought that the constant battles as a pirate was training enough, but she remembered that they always attacked rather weak groups with the exception of a few times she would hail as Grand Tails. Now being forced to train, she rapidly grew in strength. She was always pushed to the extreme by them and by the room itself. She would have died numerous times if it weren't for these healing capsules they got. They also taught her some things about ki control and let her have access to their library. They said that her uncle gifted it to them, so she would be able to learn anyway if she went to her uncle and requested it later. Either way, it didn't matter to them. They would usually take time to read on the techniques together and discuss them. It would take a few years until they would be through the whole library. Broly said that although some are exceptional techniques, she should focus on making a technique of her own with the knowledge she gained. He also added to become vastly stronger, so it would better his training, which pissed Aaliyah and Kana off, and they directly turned into the next level they called Super Saiyan 2. She thought that the name was a bit uncreative, but the strength of that transformation was no joke. They got twice as strong as their normal Super Saiyan after taking that form. It forced Broly to go non-full power Super Saiyan, which shocked her greatly. After thinking a bit, it was stupid for her to assume that he couldn't transform. After asking, they said that Broly could transform into something that was stronger than Super Saiyan 2. Broly surprisingly explained his forms to her. The yellow eyes were called Ikari, which multiplies his power by 8. Next was non-full power Super Saiyan, which was the same as a normal mastered Super Saiyan, a 100x multiplier. He said that he could stack Ikari on top, but with the increase in strength through Super Saiyan, his return through Ikari would diminish. As a non-full power Super Saiyan, his Ikari only multiplied it by 3x, which would result in a stacked 300x multiplier. His legendary Super Saiyan, or just legendary state, Broly referred it to, was a 400x plus a 1.5x multiplier from Ikari, resulting in 600x times his base. She was utterly shocked at this revelation. Someone who could fight on even ground with her former boss Bojack and kill him with his first transformation was able to become 75x times stronger than that. She was baffled. Wouldn't he be able to easily conquer the universe? Not to mention him, but his girlfriends were exceptional strong as well, and from their conversations, she could gather that there were at least 2 more Super Saiyans, who should be close to the female strength. It took a while to accept this fact, but she couldn't complain about their enormous strength after she saw their extreme training regime. Every other person would have died already, even with their healing capsules. It showed their mental state and that they put serious efforts into becoming stronger, which in the first time in her life motivated her to train to her limits as well. Although she was naturally stronger and grew stronger rapidly, she still lost out to the Saiyans and their strange physique. She also polished her transformation. In contrast to the bulkier male transformation, the females would still be lean but with dense muscles. For the next 2 years they trained together without stop until they landed on another planet. With an additional person, they wanted to stock up on more supplies. In the beginning, they were on guard with her, especially Aaliyah and Kana. Zangya obviously knew why, but after showing no intention to seduce their man, they had quickly warmed up with her. Zangya realized that although they were battle maniacs, they were very nice to her and she genuinely enjoyed their stupid conversations, even though she was constantly teased by Kana, which annoyed her a bit. But overall, this was nowhere near as bad as she had initially dreaded. Rather, it could be said it felt like a nice vacation. This group was much more enjoyable than her previous one. It was nice to have other females around, instead of a boss that disregarded her and 3 others who would goggle at her the whole time. It softened Zangya a bit that they started considering her a friend. She unknowingly slowly accepted to be part of this group. Coupled with the strength the Saiyans displayed, it showed how unrealistic her past dream to conquer the universe with her strength was. But this only gave her a new goal, to chase after them. They landed on an orange planet with life on it. There was a civilization on it, but they were rather primitive. Thankfully, there were plenty of beasts they could kill for food. The water was good as well. They would only have to filter it once to make it drinkable. Of course, with their powerful bodies, they would hardly catch any illnesses or diseases, but they filtered it anyway to give it a cleaner feeling. Broly had scanned the planet with their ship's scouter, only to find several individuals with a battle power of 5,000, which was impressive for such a remote planet. He quickly approached them, only to see a village. Broly grinned at the sight. Zangya had already put the pump into the water and had nothing to do anymore. As she saw Broly flying towards the distance, she quickly followed him. She saw him stare at a village. Do you want to kill them? What?
No.
We don't that here. Just wanted to take a look at the aboriginals. Take a look? Why? They are just low-level creatures with barely any strength. As soon as she said that, Broly flicked her forehead and waved his finger in her face. No. Even weak creatures like them can get abnormal strong. And never underestimate someone just because our scouter says they have a low power level. After all the time you spend with us, you should know that one can suppress one's power. Sigh. Broly sighed disappointedly. Even though it was obviously faked, it still irritated her. Chapter 80. Bragging. So, you expect some experts here? Zangya rolled her eyes as she asked. HM? No, I don't. As if there were any strong creatures on this backward planet. I just wanted to brag a bit. A vein popped after hearing that, but she quickly calmed down and inquired further.
How?
About what? Of course, of how strong I am. I want to see them despair when they realize they stand no chance against me. Why? She was confused. Why would someone like him feel the need to brag to some aboriginals about his strength? One can probably count the people who can match him in strength on one hand. Of course, that was not the opinion Broly had on the experts of the universe. Because it is fun. He quickly landed in the middle of what appeared to be the market. She looked at the spectacle from above. He was speaking to them. Of course they couldn't understand anything he said. He fired a key blast on empty area, which resulted in them panicking. Next, what appears to be the tribe's chief came out and dashed towards Broly and just punched out, unleashing numerous attacks only to find it ineffective against Broly, who just took the attacks head-on without flinching. He slapped the chief away. Considering the difference in power, Zangya couldn't understand why Broly started laughing at their dejected and terrified faces. He then flew to another tribe, but this time assumed an almighty being who came to teach them, Zangya figured. She knew that only because she saw him draw out key meditation methods. Although there was still a barrier of language, the strongest out of the group seemed to understand and kneeled down to Broly like he was a god. He again flew to another tribe and acted out another scene. A hero, a thief, a bandit, a lost person, a beggar. Obviously, Broly didn't go around this planet and acted out these scenarios because it was fun. Zangya approached him and asked again why he did that. Broly gave her a look before he started to explain. I am acting. Acting? What do you need acting for? Zangya was even more puzzled now. Broly laughed at her confused face. Because I want to be a villain and give some motivation. After saying that, he turned around and headed to their ship. Zangya pondered about his reasoning, but she couldn't get anything out of it. To be a villain? To give motivation? Are there some heroes he wants to push? The Galactic Patrol? As she was pondering about it, her thoughts took a strange turn. Am I a villain? She couldn't help but realize that considered to this group, she was more villainous. Although she saw the three as devilish creatures in the beginning, she realized they were good people. They didn't go around and exterminate civilization or kill without reason like she did in the past. Of course, she hadn't spent much time with them, but this is how she perceived them. She, on the other hand, after her race and her planet was exterminated, she only wanted to stand on the top of this universe. She unleashed her anger on the races of the universes and exterminated them. She only bullied the weak, while she never thought about the consequences her actions caused. In a way, no, I am a villain. Suddenly someone patted on her shoulder. She turned her head and saw Broly smiling at her. What are you thinking about? Broly looked at her, seemingly trying to pry into her mind. Nothing. Do you want me to stop bully them? Broly asked her in a teasing manner. Zangya furrowed her eyebrows. In her eyes, this wasn't even considered bullying. He just pulled some stupid acts with them, but of course she wouldn't say that. No. It's nothing. It was only unnoticeable, but her eyes had a glint of guilt in them. Broly, who was unbelievable perceptive, saw this. You were scum. Zangya widened her eyes in shock, but more than shock, she felt sad for how Broly saw her. She wanted to fly away but was held into place by him. You know, your uncle is a really good man, a hero. He took in countless people from different races into his city and protected them from a murderous race. He didn't ask for anything in return and even offered to guide the next generation of the other races. He even almost lost his life by protecting my and many other races. You, on the other hand, did what you wanted to do, killed and probably wiped out races. She gritted her teeth in frustration but couldn't rebuke him in any way. She endured it in silence. But you have changed tremendously in the short time you were with us. You have softened up. Although we only forced you to train with us and chatted in the breaks with each other, you took this time to improve yourself and your attitude. It didn't even take long for you to become friends with the others. From what I can see, you are no scum anymore. You know, your uncle said that after you became more powerful, you became more arrogant and started terrorizing the Milky Way galaxy. It seems he was right. It only took a slap over your head and a different company to humble yourself. Maybe in the future you will be a villain again or a hero like your uncle. If you feel guilty about what you did in the past, there are plenty of opportunities to redeem yourself in the future. But if you don't want to, then don't. Zangya now became confused. Didn't he want to tell her to do her best to be a hero? There are rarely true heroes that would give their lives for their righteous cause. Aaliyah and Kana are nice girls and wouldn't create trouble for trivial things, but to their enemies they are monsters and considered villains. I, on the other hand, would kill everyone who would disrespect me or get on my nerves. We aren't heroes, just a few battle-crazed Saiyans who like each other. If you want to be a hero to redeem yourself, want to kill every living being in sight or just live your life, go ahead. We won't dictate what kind of person you want to become. No matter what person you become, if we get along, we are cool. Besides, we are only here to take you to your uncle. All right, enough talking, let's get inside. I want to get off this planet. Broly left the stunned Zangya standing outside while he went inside the ship. Zangya was touched but started to think about what he was trying to say and suddenly started laughing. Basically, no one is perfect, and I don't care what kind of person you want to become. Don't get on my nerves and I won't kill you. Interesting. Although you said all that, it is not how you really feel, right? If I just randomly killed people on this planet, you would have probably stopped me. He just wants me to show my true face and my views on life and decide over me afterwards. Didn't think you were the kind who manipulates someone with your words. Good. Finally a leader with some brain. All right, if you want to see my true self, I won't hide anything. Become the judge if we get along. Indeed, Broly could feel that although she opened up a lot to them, she was still on guard. He really only cared if he would get along with someone. He himself was doing whatever he wanted to do, but he still had a moral compass. Though his moral was twisted a bit after being reborn into this universe, or rather his sadistic nature and the love for battles came to surface, he still didn't love to cause or see mayhem. If Zhangya was just an unreasonable murderous cunt, he wouldn't hesitate to end her. He already knew that Zhangya was clever through their conversations and would recognize what he meant. If he realized that she was still hiding after what he said, it would also tell him something. This was a test not for her to become a hero, but if Broly could get along with her, and if she survives until she was delivered to her uncle. They again started their journey through space. Nothing really changed in their routine except for the increased configurations on the panels and the dynamic between the three. Kana, could you be more considerate at night? Someone on here wants to sleep after her shower. Oh, did I disturb your sleep? I am so sorry. Kana apologized. Yes, you did. And don't you think you're a bit exaggerating? There is no way your moans are real. Humph. I didn't think for a second you would understand something like this, old virgin hag. You. Who are you calling hag? You horny slut. Zhangya retorted angrily. Oh, so virgin is correct? Broly smiled bitterly at the sight. Suddenly 2 arms hugged around his neck from behind, and Aaliyah whispered to him. She doesn't mince her words anymore. Yeah, I know. She became really feisty with Kana after our stop. Maybe I shouldn't have encouraged her to open up? Well, I think it was the best thing you could have done. She doesn't have to hold back anymore. Although they are quarreling, she seems happier now. Broly slowly stroked Aaliyah's hand while inwardly agreeing to her words.